What has surprised us from our time being advisors, working with people, helping them with their money problems? What has surprised us being financial advisors? That's what we're here to talk about today. So Valerie, we have obviously benefited from just having a lot of experience, right? It's not necessarily that we maybe are just financial gurus or anything like that. It's just we've had this repetition, seen so many different events. And I certainly have had things surprise me that I just didn't anticipate once I got into this. And I think might be helpful to share with people. But I'd like to maybe start with you as far as what has surprised you about this career, just being a financial advisor.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing was that I came in here thinking it was about money.
Yeah.
And it's very much not about, it's sort of about money, but it's much more emotional career, right? It's about understanding where people are coming from, what it is that motivates them, that drives them. Because you can always say, the solution to all of your problems is a bigger return, but it's really not. It's about how you're going to feel about the risk that comes with it, what you need that for, when you need it for, and really what it is that you're trying to use it for. And so having a ton of money actually I've seen hurt people in my career. So maybe that would be one of the other surprises, is that there is a point when having a huge amount of wealth without having direction and guidance can be detrimental.
Yeah. How did you kind of, when did that shift occur, right? So you obviously had some frame when you entered the business and, that shifted over time. What caused that shift? Was it just the experience of it? What was kind of your expectation, I guess, when you got it? You mentioned not thinking it would be about money, but how did that start to shift over time for you?
I think there was definitely an experience when I started working with people that were going through a transition. And so a widow or a divorcee, that I was noticing that they had a large amount of money, perhaps, but that wasn't helping them to figure out their life. They just were so confused. It wasn't bringing happiness. They couldn't tell which way was up. And so as I started talking with them and helping them realize that what they're actually looking for is direction. And once we got to that, then the money started making more sense and figuring out how do I actually implicate or involve that. That was for me the biggest thing was once I started working with people that were really facing more emotional trauma regarding money, as opposed to someone just coming in with a transaction and saying, I want to buy a house in a year. How do I do that? Yeah. How about for you, Mike? What experiences have you had that kind of shifted your focus?
Yeah, I would say it was really quick. You learn pretty quick, your expectations don't line up with reality for any job, right? For most part, it usually isn't how you expect it to be. The first surprise to me was I set all these meetings my first week in the business and nobody showed up.
Ouch.
I just kind of expected, well, hey, I've set aside this time to speak with people about their money and, they'll come in and, we'll go through everything. I'm not charging. I just want to, learn more about their situation. I'm obviously heavily relying on a senior advisor for these meetings. And, it didn't help that I didn't send Outlook reminders, but I just kind of assumed that adults would show up to meetings. You don't realize
it just happened to matter to everybody.
Yeah. You don't realize how busy people are. And if there isn't a pressing desire, a pain or a pleasure they're going to be getting out of that meeting, right? And you haven't set that stage, then it's going to be very difficult for people to be willing to allocate some type of time. And I think that's representative of this massive barrier that exists in financial planning of just being willing to, I think, sit down and think through these concepts, right? And so the challenge I had thought in, getting into this was okay, figuring out what investments are going to be savvy, what's going to really make the most sense. But in reality, the biggest barrier for most people is just getting them to care about this. Because we're all so busy, we have so many competing, narratives and slices for our attention. So that was very surprising. As far as that barrier being much more psychological and behavioral barrier than an actual analytical one, or just choosing investments for someone, right? Because you can't choose investments for someone that's not there, right? Like,
Mhm.
it's going to be very difficult to plan for somebody that isn't at the table. So that was surprising. But, I guess I'm kind of curious then for you. You mentioned that shift occurring, but like, how did you even think to get into the business? Was it, I guess pre-shift, how did you think about even getting into the business? What kind of led you to even consider being a financial planner?
So that I really have a pretty deep emotional connection to it. My family's from El Salvador. We immigrated as refugees during the Salvadorian Civil War. And as a result, my parents did not finish college. The Berlin surgeon actually took over the university where they were studying. And so they left. There were two little kids at the time, came to the United States. English was not the first language. And so trying to navigate a career when there's little kids involved, when you don't have a degree, when you can't speak the language, it's really hard. So I watched as they tried to, provide for us when minimum wage was the best that they could do. Later on, my parents split. And so it was my mom with three little kids. And it was just around the clock working and working. And I started to perceive that something about the lack of money was making determinations for us, that we had to decide how we were going to live our lives based on the fact that there was no money. And so for us, it actually became a situation where she ended up living with a man who she put on a brave face, but I knew that there was bad things happening behind the scenes. And I decided, I want to understand why there is no money here. How do we get money? What do we do with the money once we get it? How do I, make myself empowered and independent and not have this cycle exist for me? So that's really where, I didn't even understand where to start. My first job was a bank teller
Yeah.
because I was like, I know that they have money in banks. And so again, it was really like, I'm just going to learn the transactional side of this, the ins and outs of it. I got a business degree, same thing. It was pretty general. And throughout my career, I worked in a back office at an RIA, or I'm sorry, at a 401k office, like custodial type of work. I sold annuities. I sold, whatever kind of life insurance I could. It was that transactional. And then when I finally found my first RIA, registered investment advisory firm, I realized like, oh, I get it now. I can help a client in the same way that a doctor helps a patient, right? You look at them holistically and you don't just say, this random medicine is the best for you. Like maybe it is
Yeah.
helpful, but maybe it's hurtful. And so that was really for me what it was that inspired me.
That's really cool. Yeah. I mean, that's obviously a very special story. And, it sounds like eventually there it shifted from like a sales job to an advising job.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. Did you have to cut your teeth on some transactional sales, or were you able to sort of see the light all at once?
We didn't say that we are transactional sales. We said we
Sure.
were advising. But you learn pretty quickly that everybody kind of says they do financial planning. The depth of that and the meaning of that varies significantly from firm to firm, though. So that firm that I started with, was very heavily insurance based. And I'd love to have some grandiose story as to why I got into financial planning, but I just majored in finance. And it was like, okay, you can go into a role where there's more analytic space and you're just looking more into the numbers, and more of a role where you're maybe working with people and helping explain the numbers. And planning seemed to be more of that second one that fit who I was. The company, though, that I went to said, well, hey, you get to sell insurance and you get to manage money. You can make money in two ways. And I was like, well, that sounds better than just one. So I learned, though, that there was a parent company involved with that situation where there was a very heavy insurance focus. And all of a sudden, the same product and company kept showing up. And I started getting a paycheck from that one company. It was like, okay, feels like I work for just an insurance company now. Okay, it's getting very clear. I do work for an insurance company. So it was very much um, a, a sales role for an insurance company where we all called ourselves advisors. But, you can't, you don't really know what is out there until you get into it sometimes, right? And the public is the same way. They couldn't differentiate between that type of firm is easily, as we might think, compared to, let's just say, a Mariner. So, um, I think, for me, what more stood out is the reinforcement of like, oh, wow, it's super important for us to be there for people, because there's a difference between simple and easy, and there's complexity to what we do. But the biggest barrier, the biggest thing that we help people out with is not terribly complex. Those behavioral aspects, in a lot of ways, um, are just not easy to accomplish, right? To get over. And so for me, it's kind of, been a continuous, hey, I really love when I find these opportunities within the complexity to really help solve problems for people and get technical and all that. But the reinforcement and kind of the why has been, if I am not there for somebody, even for 6 months to a year, something because of entropy can just easily get out of whack in their plan. And they got so much going on that will likely continue for years. I mean, there's things that are hidden in plain sight. One of the things that I've thought about late at night, was probably kind of embarrassing to admit, is like, how many people have these inefficiencies in their plan and will never know it? They could live 80 to 90 years and have no idea that they could have had, 20 to 30% more wealth by just minimizing some tax inefficiency, or by maybe their portfolio being allocated a little bit more correctly for their situation, their goals, than somebody else's, right? And
Yeah.
I'm sure you've experienced that too, as far as like just seeing how out of whack people's plans can get the more assets they have. But for me, that's been kind of the reinforcing part of like staying into it, more of my why than just the initial getting into the business.
For sure. Yeah. And I think I want to plug that it is April is Financial Literacy Month.
Nice.
And so I think I speak for the both of us that, sharing our knowledge on financial literacy is hugely important. And like you said, it's really just the basics that I think are fundamentally the most important, and just encouraging everybody to decide to take a seat at the table, because there is nobody that's beneath it, or
No.
or should I say, it feels like I often hear, I'm not smart enough, I just don't know, or so-and-so does it for me.
Yeah.
I encourage everyone to just not have those excuses, and to step up and get engaged.
I guess on that reinforcing note, for you, what has maybe made you want to stay in the business, given the alternatives that are out there in the financial sphere? You get into the financial sphere, you get your CFP, you can go work for a lot of different companies. Once you have that credential, you show that you had experience working, you can work for a lot of different companies. You can do a lot of things in finance. What has maybe made you want to stay with Mariner and made you want to stay a certified financial planner just in general?
Yeah, so I have a phenomenal team. I work with 5 other women, and we're 4 other women and 1 phenomenal man. Very supportive.
Nice.
But having that team is vastly important. And then also just being able to, I always kind of say that we're like a little boutique firm inside of a very large firm with lots of resources. And so being able to play, kind of plug and play and say, what we need is a really deep insurance analysis. And so we can go and get the experts to do that, or tax analysis, or estate planning, or whatever it is. And so just having the confidence to be able to say, yes, I can really meet any client's goals that are out there.
Yeah. I mean, obviously you get that group and you get comfortable, and, you've had experience from what it sounds like, working with different other firms. So like you have a barometer of like, okay, this is pretty great compared to maybe previous experiences, and seeing how other firms maybe handle this. And yeah, I would say that I am, kind of similar in that way, just having seen how other firms handle it. And one of the things I say and share is, and I think a lot of people share this as well that have come to Mariner, like when we built up our RIA, before we eventually joined Mariner, we could have gone to, essentially any RIA, right? Once you've built up a practice, and again, you have that credential, any firm is going to say, yeah, you can come work here. We'll figure it out, right? For us, a big part of it was certainly the depth of what Mariner offers, the tax planning, the estate planning, everything else that is a part of Mariner, the ability to get that holistic approach, right? And the ability to just have, I think a higher level of investment management internally in comparison to what I experienced before, where it's like, I would have a very simple, basic investment question. If it wasn't related to the mothership product, then it was very difficult to get an answer. At Mariner, though, I really feel like it's like, okay, I have resources in essentially every category of financial planning to where I can go find that. So kind of that reinforcement as to the why stay at Mariner, why, being a financial advisor, like I really feel like this is the best place to do that. Certainly in comparison to the previous experiences that I've had, that have helped me get here, I guess. So, anything else, I guess, that's maybe stood out to you as far as like why you've, why you became an advisor, or like maybe if you were to like think of, your past self, like your expectation, and like looking back at that past self, like how did that expectation line up with your experience?
I think that it's just a really unique way to help people. I think, my past life, I really wanted to be a doctor. And then I found OChem and it didn't work out. But this is able to...
Yeah, that's the barrier for a lot of people.
I think it's a common experience.
Yeah.
But for me, numbers made more sense. And it's just a really nice way to be able to help everybody. And so that is really what I think, that is what I love most about the career.
Yeah, I think so. I think a lot would agree with that. Well, wherever you might be listening, whether it's Spotify, YouTube, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss out on any industry insights from industry professionals here at Mariner. Thanks for joining Valerie and I today. You guys take care.
Thanks.
The views expressed in this podcast are for informational and educational purposes only and do not consider any individual, personal, financial, legal, or tax situation. As such, the information contained herein intended and should not be construed as a specific recommendation, individualized tax, legal, or investment advice. Where specific advice is necessary or appropriate, individuals should contact their own professional tax and investment advisors or other professionals regarding their specific circumstances and needs prior to taking any action based upon this information. The information provided has been obtained from sources deemed reliable. However, the accuracy, completeness, and reliability cannot be guaranteed. Tax laws are subject to change, either prospectively or retroactively. Any opinions expressed are subject to change at any time without notice. There is no assurance that any investment, plan, or strategy will be successful. Investing involves risk, including the possible loss of principal. Past performance is no guarantee of future results, and any opinion expressed herein should not be viewed as an indicator of future performance. Mariner is the marketing name for the financial services business of Mariner Wealth Advisors, LLC, and its subsidiaries. Investment advisory services are provided through the brands Mariner Wealth, Mariner Independent, Mariner Institutional, Mariner Ultra, and Mariner Workplace, each of which is a business name of the registered investment advisory entities of Mariner. For additional information about each of the registered investment advisory entities of Mariner, including fees and services, please contact Mariner or refer to each entity's Form ADV Part 2A, which is available on the Investment Advisor Public Disclosure website, www.advisorinfo.sec.gov. Registration of an investment advisor does not imply a certain level of skill or training.